Welcome to Villa Kenworthy. Today we're going to be making raspberry tart. Thank you for joining us at Villa Kenworthy. Today we're going to be making a raspberry tart. I was very fortunate to have some great neighbors, Jim and Gail. They let me pick some fresh raspberries from the raspberry patch, and we're going to be using those in today's recipe. In our first bowl, we have our flour, sugar, and salt. Second bowl, we've got the butter, unsalted, cubed. I have an egg yolk, and then 2 tablespoons of water. One thing to note about the butter, I always use unsalted. I like to roll the butter in flour before I cube it up. That keeps it from sticking together so much. And then I put it back in the freezer to make sure that it stays cold. You always want the butter to stay cold throughout the entire process. Step 1, we want to make our pastry dough. We want to add our flour, sugar, and salt combination right into the food processor. I'm going to start off by giving this a couple pulses just to mix everything thoroughly. Next, we want to put in our cubed butter. Spread that out evenly. As we blend the butter with the flour, we want to make sure we use the pulse function again. We don't want to overdo it. It'll create some heat and that will melt the butter down, and that's not what we're looking for. We're just going to pulse this until it starts to incorporate and turns into little tiny peas of the flour and butter combination. So this is the consistency we're looking for to start our dough. Now we'll add our egg yolk and our water. As you're pulsing it, you want to add the water slowly so you can incorporate it throughout the entire dough. Once you have it slowly incorporated into the dough, then you can add a little bit longer times to bring all of the flour together. When your dough begins to look like this, then you can roll it out onto a nice clean surface. I'll start by taking out the dough blade. And I'll just dump this mixture right out. Give it a couple taps. If there's some stuck to the side, the sous chef does come with a little spatula to use to scrape it down. Now you're going to want to work all of the dough together to form one ball. I usually just start by pressing it. You don't want to overwork this dough. After you bring everything together into one nice ball of dough, you're going to wrap this in plastic wrap and then we'll store it in the fridge for an hour while we prep the rest of our ingredients. The next step is to start making our filling. We're going to start with our lemon, and before we get the juice out of it, I want to get the zest out. And to make that easier, what I'm going to do is take and place the lemon onto a flat surface, and I'm going to press and I'm going to roll. This will make it easier to get the juice out. And now we take our zester, and we just grab some of the zest. We don't need a whole lot for this. I like to do the coarser zest. I think that's enough zest for the recipe that we're using. All right, next step, cut the lemon in half. We've got this nice little easy hand juicer, and we'll just grab the lemon juice. We need a couple tablespoons for this recipe, and hopefully there's a little bit more than that I can use for the glaze. Now we add our 4 cups of raspberries to the pot, and we'll turn that on to a medium-high heat to get everything heated up. As this starts to warm up, then I'll add our sugar and the lemon juice, and we'll cook this down until it starts to just get to a boil. Then we'll add our cornstarch mixture. So our pot has started to heat up. I did add the 1 cup of water to the recipe to help me start to simmer this down. The raspberries have started to cook down. I will note that I did pick these fresh a few days ago, and I froze them because I didn't know how many I would be using, and I still have quite a few left to use. So these went from a frozen state, but they were picked fresh. And now we can add our sugar and the lemon zest and start getting them to a boil. Now we're adding our sugar in. We'll mix this in thoroughly and then we'll get it up to a simmer. And we're adding our 2 tablespoons of fresh squeezed lemon juice. And then some of the zest. We're just starting to get to a simmer, so at this point I'm going to add our cornstarch and water mixture. So it's 3 tablespoons of cornstarch and 3 tablespoons of water. I just mixed that into a nice little slurry, and we'll stir that in. You want to make sure that the cornstarch mixture is free from lumps, or those will turn into little gelled like pellets in your mixture. And once you add this in, you want to make sure everything gets up to a nice simmer, or else the cornstarch won't clear and you won't get a proper gel. We've gotten it to a little bit of a simmer. I'm just using a small whisk to finish blending everything together smoothly. Some people at this point will take and strain out all of the seeds in some cheesecloth or a fine mesh strainer. I like to leave the seeds in. I enjoy the texture and I kind of like the way that it looks. And it's time to pull this from the stove and we'll put this into the fridge. As it starts to cool down a little bit, I'll take some cellophane and I'll put over the top of it so that it doesn't form a skin. While our raspberry filling is chilling, I've taken out our dough. It's nice and cool. And we're going to take and roll this out, and they're going to go into these small tart pans. I got these from a friend of mine. They are antiques, I believe, and you can find many different styles and shapes depending on what you want. I just think these little hearts are pretty, so this is what we're going to use today. Take my dough scraper and I'll pull off a small chunk. I'm going to put this into a nice little ball. And then I'll roll it out with the rolling pin. We take and set our crust right on top of the mold. I'll press this in. And you want to press it in and around all sides so that it forms. And one of the great things about these little molds is they have a sharp edge to cut the dough. So once you have it pressed in where you want, you just press around the edges and you'll cut the dough right off. And I'll set this aside to reuse. This is what we're looking for. I'm going to do each one of my molds just like this, and then we'll bake them at 350 right in these tins until they start to turn a golden brown. And they're going to puff up a little bit, and then we pull those out of the oven and we let them cool. I will get these finished up and we'll be right back. My raspberry tart filling has started to cool, and now I can take and push some of this cellophane down over the top. You want to make sure that it's touching the actual filling so that it doesn't develop a skin over that, and then I'll let it finish cooling the rest of the way. I've removed the first batch of our tart shells. I'll let these cool off, remove them from their molds, and then I'll get another batch going. And here I have 1 cup of confectioner sugar, better known as powdered sugar. I'm going to make a simple glaze to go with this. I have 1 tablespoon that was left over from that lemon juice, and then a teaspoon of vanilla extract. I'm just going to pour that in here. And I'm going to start to mix it up. And as it starts to come together and thin down, I will add a tablespoon of milk. It doesn't take very much, so I don't want to overdo it. It's about a tablespoon right there. And this is what I'm going to just drizzle over the top of our raspberry tarts. We have all of our tart crust ready. Now I'm going to put the filling in, and then we'll top them with the glaze. So I've got a nice little pitcher that I decided to pour the glaze from to make it a little bit easier, but you can spoon them over. Might make a little bit of a mess, but I like to just drizzle them across. And now these can go into the fridge to continue setting up. Within a couple hours, they should be gelled nicely, and then the glaze will kind of harden up, and you'll have a nice little treat. And there you have it. That's how I make raspberry tart. I would like to put out another thank you to Jim and Gail for providing the raspberries. You're wonderful neighbors. I'll make sure I get some of these dropped off to you. I did have a little bit of extra filling left. I'll probably just freeze that until the next time that I make raspberry tart, so I already have the filling provided. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, subscribe, share, and if you have any other videos that you'd like to see or something I didn't touch on, please let me know.